In this lecture, we're going to set up the UI to show the unit that we have selected, their name, an icon, and their current health. Let's go. Right now, our bottom UI is primarily used just for the actions container. When we select a building, we get this UI that indicates it's probably building something, even though we don't necessarily have something in the queue. And none of that is great. We really want this to be a very dynamic, contextual visual display to the player so they know exactly what's going on. If we hop over to the scene view, in our runtime UI UGUI, bottom bar, center container, this has all of the different containers laid out to have a reasonable UI to display to the player. We just need to attach the scripts. If we select the selected unit icon container, enable that, we can see underneath there we just have an image and some Text Mesh Pro text that's showing the current and total health. If we also disable the building selected container and select the single unit container, we can see that we'll have a name and then some icons with some values. We'll get to those later, but in this lecture, we are going to set that name. Let's re-enable the building selected container, because remember the runtime UI is going to disable whatever doesn't need to be there. We can see we need two new container scripts, the selected unit icon container and the single unit selected container. Let's come over to VS Code and create those in the scripts UI containers folder. Let's make that unit icon UI and also a single unit selected UI. We'll start with the unit icon UI. We'll put it in our namespace, GameDevTV, RTS, UI containers. Make it a public class, unit icon UI that extends the mono behavior and implements the IUI element of type abstract commandable. We'll then implement that interface that gives us the public void disable and enable for that accepts the parameter abstract commandable item. We'll reorder those and rename item to commandable. Then we'll add two serialized fields. The first one, a private image icon, and the second one, a private Text Mesh Pro UGUI health text. Remember that our paradigm here is that the container knows about everything underneath it and then sets it up on enable for, including enabling itself. And then on disable, it'll disable itself and do any cleanup that it has to do, such as unregistering any delegate handlers. On enable for, let's do GameObject.setActive true. Then for the icon, we can do icon.sprite equals the commandable.unitso.icon. Then for the health text, we want it to be in that format of current health space maximum health. Since we know that's constant and will not be changing, up at the top, let's make a private const string health text format equals a new string with curly braces 0 space curly brackets 1. We call this a format string. And this is very special because it accepts parameters 0 and 1, which will be dynamically injected when we use the string.format function. So let's take a look at that in enable for. We can do healthText.setText and then string.format. And this accepts that format string, which is what we just defined as the health text format. And then an array of arguments that will be injected in based on the index that we defined there. So we defined index 0 should be the commandable current health. And 1, the second one, should be commandable.max health. So we can see there, 0 will be our current health, and 1 will get injected that maximum health. Anytime that we're going to have a static string format, this is a really powerful way to get that without having to do a really complicated looking template string. Now on disable, we can just do GameObject.setActive false. We need to hook this up in our runtime UI. So in runtime UI up here at the top, make a serialized field, private unit icon UI, unit icon UI. On start, we need to disable that so it doesn't show up just that default white image and a placeholder text. We don't want to see that. Now in handle unit selected, we can see we're starting to duplicate a lot of what we have going down here in refresh UI. So instead of doing all of this and duplicating the logic, let's go ahead and just change handle unit selected to call refresh UI. After the new unit is added, we can then also remove this bottom part to greatly simplify this handler. In refresh UI, we need to handle now the case where we have only a single unit selected. So if the unit count is greater than 0, let's go ahead and enable that actions UI and then do if selected units count is equal to 1. Then we'll do unit icon UI, enable for that first unit, selected units.first, else unit icon UI disable. And of course, if there are no units selected, we're going to want to disable the unit icon UI there as well. Now, I know this is starting to get a little bit bloated. We're going to refactor this very soon. Don't worry. It's not going to get too much worse than this before we really break it apart. Let's come back to Unity. Over here, we've got that selected unit icon container. Let's go ahead and attach the unit icon UI, hook up the image and the health text. Then on the runtime UI, we want to hook up that unit icon UI as well. If we come into the game view, click play. We left the single unit container enabled. That's okay. That's why we see this here. I'll just disable that really fast. Then when we select a worker, we can see their icon and their health. Same with the building. We see the building and the health. And when we select nothing, it goes away. So it's starting to look a little bit better, but we need to provide the name. We want to see like worker right here, and we want to see command post right here. If we leave play mode, if we select our command post SO, we can see that there's no way for us to get the display name of the unit. We did that on our commands, where build building command, for example, has a name that we display on the UI. Let's come back to VS Code, and on the abstract unit SO, attach a field serialized field, public string, name with a public get, private set, and give it a default value of unit. That'll add this value to all of our scriptable objects. Now let's come over to our single unit selected UI, put that in our GameDevTV RTS UI containers namespace, make it a public class, single unit selected UI that extends the mono behavior, and of course also implements the IUI element of type abstract commandable. And this lecture's challenge is to implement the single unit selected UI, so it will display the name of the abstract unit SO of the currently selected unit. Don't worry about those two icons right now, we're going to leave those alone. Just set up the name. Also tie it into the runtime UI. So pause the video, implement this container, tie it into that runtime UI, and I'll see you right back here. All right, welcome back. I hope you're able to do this one. It's following the exact same pattern that we just did. So let's go through that together now. At the top, we're going to need a serialized field, private text mesh pro UGUI unit name. On disable, we'll just set game object set active false. I'll move enable for above disable, just makes more sense to me because we're going to call enable for first. In there, we'll do game object set active true. And then unit name dot set text item dot unit so dot capital name. Lowercase name is the name of the scriptable object. We want it to be that capital name, the field on the scriptable object. It's the only thing we needed to do in this class. Then over in runtime UI, the same pattern. Up here at the top, attach a serialized field, private, single unit selected UI, single unit selected UI. On start, disable that guy. Down in refresh UI, if the selected units count is 1, go ahead and do single unit selected UI.enable for selected units first. Else disable. And in the else block at the bottom, go ahead and disable it there as well. That's all we were looking for in this challenge. I hope you're beginning to see the power of the way that we're designing this UI interaction. The majority of the complexity we see at the top level is simply which UI elements should be active based on the units that are currently selected. All of the complexity about what happens in each of these UI containers is delegated to that IUI element subcontainer. This makes adding support for these new containers very straightforward. I did say we were going to refactor this a little bit, and we can see some condensing we can do here. We've got this selected units count equals to 1 multiple times. We've also got selected units first multiple times. So let's cut that selected units first and do abstract commandable equals selected units dot first, and then provide commandable into those enable fors. This whole block down here is more or less duplicated. Let's cut the building UI disable, paste it into our top else. And then in our top, if selected units count is 1, we can add if commandable is base building and do building UI enable for building. Then we can delete the bottom portion because there's nothing happening here anymore. And again, else disable in case it's not a building. We added a little bit more nesting, but less verticality. We're going to still go further with this refactor, but at least we're a little bit more organized now. Let's come back to Unity and see all this working end to end. In our single unit container, attach that single unit selected UI, hook up the name. On runtime UI, hook up that single unit selected container, save and click play. When we select a worker, now it looks a lot better. We didn't rename our workers. We'll do that in just a second. We've got our worker, the name displayed. When we select nothing, it all goes away. Perfect. When we select a building, we have two UIs showing. That's actually okay. I want to leave it there in this lecture because in the next lecture, we're going to work on the more specific building UI stuff. And we can tell over here, our building selected container, we've got multiple subcontainers and we need to worry about the single unit container. So let's handle all of that together in the next lecture. But before we get out of here on this one, let's exit play mode and head over to our assets, units, worker folder. We need to change these names. We're going to go kind of fast because it's just the same thing over and over. Select the worker asset and change the name to worker. Call the rifleman, rifleman. Call the grenadier, grenadier. Call the supply hut, supply hut. Infantry school called the infantry school. Command post called the command post. Barracks called the barracks. Airport called the airport. And finally, the air transport called the air transport. Right now, we happen to have the same name of our scriptable object asset and the display name. That's not guaranteed to be the case. And personally, I don't like the asset file name to be what we display to the user. I much prefer it to be a string value that we have defined on the object, so it's very clear where that value is coming from. Let's click play one last time. There we go. We see worker, we see command post. Let's just disable the container here. We've got the command post showing perfect. That's all we've got for this lecture. When you're ready to work on the building UI, I'll see you on the next one.